Hey guys, welcome back. Today I want to start a new series that is talking about a deck that is new to the format. We'll also cover some older decks in the future and talk about how you can stop this new specific deck, or to point it out more clearly, how to hand trap or where to hand trap the new meta deck, the new deck coming to the format. And in this video we want to talk about Voiceless Voice. If you're not familiar with what this deck does, I will highly recommend you watch the combo video. It's in the top right corner, because if you want to understand this deck and want to counter it effectively, obviously this video has the purpose of giving you all the necessary information. But then again, if you understand the combos, the combo lines, the basic combos which are not that hard in this deck, then you will also have an easier time to understand where to interrupt this deck with your specific interruptions, because we will talk about general hand traps, but there are other forms of interruptions. For example, if you are playing Fire King Snake Eyes, then you also have your Kirin destroy something interruption, and a destruction is obviously an interruption that is no hand trap, so we are not going to talk specifically about this. So obviously the core play, if you're not familiar with this, is having your Low and your Skull Guardian on the field together with maybe something else, but maybe only these two monsters here, so that the deck can basically grind you out over time when it comes to resources, because they can revive resources, get them back to the hand from the graveyard or the banishment with this as card here. Also with the barrier can recur resources, so once they have these continuous spells and traps online, they can via time get more resources, so they don't build up a board that is necessarily super impressive and has a lot of negates. But then again, this guy that is an Omni negate together with the barrier, making him and the Low herself untargetable, and also only him can be attacked. It's very hard to break through sometimes, but that's not what we want to talk about in this video. So the main core Stardust, let's talk about maybe the most common hand trap first that we will all have in our deck. Obviously, we're not going to talk about Maxi. If you have Maxi, then just drop it in the draw phase, in my opinion, just to play around a triple tactics talents. This depends a bit, the Maxi philosophy. So for example, if I have a hand in which I have no starter, so let's say I had a hand that consisted of 2 court buys, a crossout, and then I had 2 infinite impermanences, and okay, this doesn't work, -1 infinite and +1 Maxi. So I have no starter. So when I now throw the Maxi in the draw phase, then my opponent could just pass over to me and not giving me a single draw, and then I still have no card that I can play, which means I will most likely just pass back over to him, depending on my top deck obviously, and then have wasted my Maxi. So what I do in this case, if I have a hand that does not play, I wait with my Maxi until a point where my opponent, for example, does something like Ritual Summon or Ritual Spell to Ritual Summon, and at this point obviously he is committed to doing a special summon, and he will at least give me one card, which might be a card which I can use to start my play. So this is my Maxi philosophy. But Ash Blossom, what can you Ash here? I think, in my opinion, there are 2 good targets here, and then there's 1 less good target. This obviously always depends on the situation. So one of the best targets is, in my opinion, the Zafira. Zafira says you can discard this card, send 1 ritual spell from your deck to the graveyard, then you can add 1 light ritual monster from your deck to your graveyard or to your hand. So not only are you basically cancelling out the second part of the effect, which is the effect that is actually ashable, but also this send 1 ritual spell from your deck to the graveyard, which is also ashable. I just realized you will cancel out both of these effects, meaning that the ritual spell won't go to the graveyard and the ritual monster won't come to the hand. The disadvantage is that obviously Zafira's second effect, which says you can banish this card from your graveyard, ritual summon 1 light ritual monster, warrior or dragon from your hand, blah blah blah, can still be activated, because this will still go to the graveyard. So you basically stopping with the Ash a ritual spell in the grave that can be used to resummon another ritual monster. If you're not aware, if this thing here is in the grave, and this is very important to understand, also in terms of playing around, very important to understand, because this will normally be in the Voiceless Voice player's graveyard, and it says if a face-up light ritual monster you control leaves the field by an opponent's card effect, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon 1 Sour Harvest, the Ancient and Ascendant, or Skull Guardian, Protector of the Voices, from hand or deck. So if you somehow remove this via card effect, your opponent can just summon another one from the deck, which is very important when thinking about interruptions like super polymerization, because obviously when talking about super polymerization, we can super polymerize away the Low together with the Skull Guardian, which are two monsters that are on the field, but it doesn't really make a difference if then the prayers can just be used to summon another Skull Guardian, which then can be used to summon another low, because if you're not aware, if this is in the graveyard and a ritual monster comes to the field, then you can special summon the low. So Super Polymerization, for example, into this board will not solve this board, which is why Super Polymerization is not that great against Voiceless Voice. Obviously, you could just go ahead and ash this if your opponent wants to resummon a ritual monster, but then again, Super Poly not the most effective one. Ash Blossom though is, we can Ash Blossom the Zafira, as I already talked about, or another great target is Pre-Preparation of Rites, because this adds a ritual spell from deck to hand and one ritual monster from graveyard or deck. So this is basically giving your opponent two additional cards, which obviously is great to be Ash Blossomed. Another potential option is Ash Blossoming the Barrier of the Voiceless Voice, because this can also search, or sometimes it can make sense to Ash Blossom the Guardian, the Skull Guardian. This does make sense, especially in the case that your opponent summons a Skull Guardian in his hand and does not use a low for it. Because if you're not aware, a low can be summoned or can be used, this is level 1, but low can be used as the entire tribute for a complete ritual monster, so for example for the Skull Guardian here. And then I talked about this already, when she's in the graveyard then and a ritual monster comes to the field, which would be the case if I use her for the cost for this ritual summon, then she can be special summoned. So one of the best things that the Voiceless Voice player will want to do is use his low in the hand to summon his Skull Guardian, thereby sending the low to the graveyard and resummoning it. But if your opponent makes a Skull Guardian not with a low, then you can kind of guess that there is no low in his hand. But the thing is that Skull Guardian's summoning effect says if this card is ritual summoned, you can add one Voiceless Voice monster or one ritual monster from your deck to your hand, which will normally, if they have not started with the low, ending in him searching the low and then normal summoning the low, at which point the Omni Negate is live. So if you ever see your Voiceless Voice opponent just making the ritual summon not using a low for the tribute, then it could be the case that he does not have a low, and therefore it might make sense to ash the Skull Guardian if you have not already ashed Zafira, or maybe a Pre-Preparation of Rites, which are definitely the best targets. In this specific list, Pot of Prosperity would also be great. Let's talk about Effect Veiler and Infinite Impermanence. I will just make Infinite Impermanence or type in Infinite Impermanence here and we talk about this one. Obviously, this is the same as Effect Veiler, as they works the same basically. So using the Effect Veiler or the Infinite Impermanence, the best way, or one of the best ways, is the normal summon Diviner of the Herald, if this is something that your opponent plays, and also the normal summon low is a good target. So Diviner of the Herald is a good target because if you negate this normal summon, then it could be quite difficult for your opponent to get a low on the field, right? They would need to have a low in the hand and then ritual summon so that the low goes to the graveyard and comes back. But if they can't do that, and they cannot add the low to the head basically, they can't summon her, they can't normal summon her, right? So if they started with a strange hand, then they might be stuck with the low in hand because they have normal summoned the Diviner. And obviously if you imperm this or Effect Veiler this gives your Voiceless Voice opponent access to the low, which they would then have this card, the Trias Hierarchy, and also the low on the field, because you will send with the Diviner the Trias Hierarchy. Trias Hierarchy tributes the Diviner, and then Diviner triggers in the graveyard to summon a low. So Imperm here, Effect Veiler here is very nice. Also a very good target is the low herself, not only because she sets like the barrier and then this searches for the Zafira, and the Zafira then gives you access to the Skull Guardian, which maybe depending on the hand of your Voiceless Voice opponent, hitting the low here can also stop his play because he needed the barrier, which you might also have hard drawn obviously. But there's another important reason why you should it's basically recommendable to imperm or Effect Veiler the low, because this also says if you ritual summon exactly one ritual or light ritual monster with a card effect that requires use of monsters, this card can be used as the entire tribute. So the fact that we can use her for the entire tribute is her effect. So if you Infinite Impermanence her or you Effect Veiler her, she cannot be used as the entire tribute material basically, because this is what a text says. So it's also very effective to imperm or Effect Veiler her because of that. And then sometimes it could make sense to just Infinite Impermanence or Effect Veiler the Skull Guardian. This is in the same scenario that we just talked about. If the Skull Guardian is a mate with not the low, from the ritual summon, but with anything else like a Nibiru or something, then you can make the guess that the low is not in hand and that the Skull Guardian wants to search the low. So if you then negate the Skull Guardian, he cannot search the low your opponent, and also the Skull Guardian will be negated for the turn, meaning that there is no negation. So if you have a Nibiru or something and the Nibiru should be live, then you can infinite impermanence the negation and then just throw your Nibiru and clear the board, for example. Talking about Nibiru would be the next hand trap. What do you or where do you want to Nibiru? In this case, a Voiceless Voice is unfortunately a deck that is not really weak to Nibiru, because normally you don't summon 5 times, and if you do summon 5 times, you will already have a Skull Guardian on the field which can negate the Nibiru. Hence the idea to infinite impermanence the Skull Guardian and then Nibiru him afterwards. But as I already said, you will have a lot of situations in which your Voiceless Voice opponent will not use or will not summon 5 times, so you can't even use your Nibiru. This is generally a bad hand trap against this deck, and your opponent would need to make very aggressive and risky plays in order for you to be able to Nibiru. But then again, if you can Nibiru, then you obviously should Nibiru when this card is no longer on the field. So there are a few lines that could achieve this. So for example, some people might end up on a Dynamondo, so you go your low, for example, then you go for the Skull Guardian, then you have low and Skull Guardian on the field, which would be the 3rd summon, and then maybe you do another summon and then you take your Skull Guardian and the low and go into a Dynamondo, because the Dynamondo can get them back on your turn, the Guardian, the Skull Guardian and the low, so on your opponent's turn. And in this case, you obviously could use an Nibiru, but in general, this is a hand trap that is not great against a Voiceless Voice. And these are like the most important ones, I would say. If we are talking Ghost Ogre, if you are using a Ghost Ogre, which I can't, because I don't have her. You could also use a Ghost Ogre, obviously, if you want to use a Ghost Ogre. Can we find her? Then, because this will be a hand trap that will be more, popular in the next format when we get Tempai Dragon. But if you want to Ghost Ogre something, this will probably be the Barrier of the Voiceless Voice, because this is continuous. You can just destroy this, and this is very important for your opponent to search Zafira. Don't Ghost Ogre like the Skull Guardian, because as I already said, if this is in the graveyard, it will just come back. Doesn't really make sense. So this is the best target to use in Ghost Ogre on. And then we have cards like Ghost Mourner, obviously. Ghost Mourner basically being the same idea as the Infinite Impermanence or the Effect Veiler. The difference being is that it's not that great against this deck, because you can't hit the normal summons, right? The Ghost Mourner can only hit special summons, so you can't hit the low, you can't hit the Diviner. Therefore, one of the best targets for a potential Ghost Mourner, if you should play this card, is the Skull Guardian, obviously, so he can't get access to the low, and because this is a special summoned monster. What else could we talk about? We have cards like Evenly, for example, so going into the board breaker category. Is this good against this deck? It depends, I guess. The deck normally doesn't put too many bodies and face down cards and stuff on the board, and then they also have this Omni Negate that can obviously negate this evenly matched, so this is definitely not the best deck to play evenly matched against. Good decks being decks that don't have like trap and spell Omni Negates, but this deck has, so if you just go to battle phase, your opponent might know what you are up to and then just save the negate for the evenly match, right? We have cards like Dark Ruler, if you want to use these in the format to counter Voiceless Voice. This is definitely something that you can do. You can just Dark Ruler, and then the Skull Guardian as well as the low will be negated, at which point they obviously can't be used anymore. Keep in mind though that the barrier on the field, which says while you control low and a light ritual monster, your opponent can only attack ritual monsters and cannot target light monsters. This would still be up, so you definitely need to break this part of the effect. And there also could be other things on the board. So for example, if your opponent could get access to a Sour Avis via the trap that might be on the field, then the Sour Avis could potentially, so assuming that you Dark Ruler and then afterwards they summon a Sour Avis, so that it's not Dark Ruler, they could, for example, tag out the Sour Avis for another Skull Guardian, and maybe they have another low in the grave, and then they have the low Skull Guardian negation back live again, but this is not super likely. So Dark Ruler is definitely a card that is nice against this deck, but make sure to also clear it afterwards, and keep in mind that the barrier still defends all of this stuff. You can also use a Forbidden Droplet. This obviously works because we are targeting protected, but this one does not target. So that's quite nice. You can just negate the Skull Guardian. You could not negate the low. Can you negate the low? No, you can't. You just negate the Skull Guardian, which is nice because then also, if you're not aware, this gets an attack boost when lows on the field or in the grave to 4100, making it very hard to be overrun. But obviously with a Forbidden Droplet, this should go to 1025 because it's half the original attack and the effect is negated if I'm not, if I don't get this incorrectly here. But nevertheless, even if it stays at 250, then it's also nice because 250 can be overrun quite easily. So you can definitely use a droplet to break the board if you so desire. Same things go for cards like Raigeki and Dark Hole, I guess. Then again, if you use these cards, keep in mind that this can just resummon the Skull Guardian, and also they can be negated. Very nice cards against this deck. The best counter cards, you could say, are the Bestials. If you have Bestials in your deck and want to use Bestials against this deck, then one of the best targets is the Low in the graveyard, because if Low is in the graveyard, especially if she's on the chain to be summoned back and the Skull Guardian is already on the field, obviously you stealing the Low from the graveyard means that the Skull Guardian has no negate effect, and it also is only at 250, and the barrier is not live because the barrier needs Low and a light ritual monster on the field. Another good target for a potential Bestial, obviously this also counts for DD Crows, so DD Crows included in this category would be the Zafira, because when Zafira is in the graveyard, she can be banished to make a ritual summon. And this is something that you have to always think about when playing against Voiceless Voice. Always keep in mind that they can only ritual summon via the Zafira and via the ritual spell. So if you can stop these here, and normally access to the ritual spell is not that easy, it's normally the easier way to get a Zafira into the grave and ritual summon via the Zafira. So it's not that likely that your opponent will also have the ritual spell. If, for example, you maybe have Ash, the pre-preparation of rights that is, but getting the Zafira out of the graveyard is very strong and can definitely stop your opponent's play, as well as getting the Low out of the graveyard. So I guess these are the most important things. These are the most important hand traps that you can use against this deck, the most important removals. Always keep in mind, if you want to break an opponent's Voiceless Voice board, always check out the graveyard whether the prayer of the Voiceless Voice is in here, and keep that in mind, that if you destroy this guy, he can potentially just come back, and then could also summon another Low if she's in graveyard. So don't use your Super Poly at this point. Don't just destroy this guy without being able to deal with another one. So always think about this when breaking the board. And don't forget that in the battle phase, if the barrier, the guardian, and the Low is on the field, which is what the deck normally wants to achieve, then you can only attack the ritual monsters, which in this case would be a 4100 Skull Guardian. You can't kill the Low so that the Omni Negate is no longer alive. And for example, if your opponent establishes an IP Masquerina, you can target her with card effects because she's not a light monster, but still you can only attack the Skull Guardian. So never ever try to just run over an IP Masquerina in battle phase. This won't work. I think these are the most important things. One other thing that I want to mention here at this point, it's very effective getting rid in a grind game, that is of this card here, the Blessing of the Voiceless Voice. Because this card says you can target one of your Voiceless Voice cards that is banished or in your graveyard and add it to your hand. In a grind situation, this is the best card in the entire deck, because this can also grab back the trap, which you can use the trap to target cards your opponent controls up to the number of light ritual monsters you control. Destroy both this card and as many of the targeted cards as possible. A very strong interruption that goes to the grave afterwards, and it can be recycled with the Blessing. Blessing can also recycle everything else. So if you are in a grind game situation, always get rid of the Blessing of the Voiceless Voice, because this will otherwise grind you out most likely. And this is everything that you basically have to understand and take care of this deck. When it comes to this deck, you know which hand traps are good, which hand traps are not that great, and then also board breakers here. Tell me if I forgot something very, very important, or any major hand trap, any major board breaker. I hope you liked it. Let me know in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. If you like my videos, please consider subscribing, hitting the thumbs up and the notification bell. We will see each other in the next one.